Hello, Monday Mamas. It is Monday, and I've made it to you guys before 9 p.m., so high fives all around. Hope you're all doing well. It is a pretty nice day here in Carstairs. We've got some sunshine. We had a glorious weekend. It's a little bit nerve-wracking that this is so nice out here because we normally don't get summer till like good old July, and it's June. It's been nice since May, so we're all a little bit scared. But I've been living it all up. I've been living outside, and I read an entire book basically over the weekend and just doing all the things. So I was going back and forth on what to talk about today, on what's kind of on my heart today, and I was listening this morning to a podcast between Tim Bilyeu, that's how you say his name, Bilyeu. He does a podcast called Impact Theory, and it's quite good, and I quite enjoy him most of the time. Today he had Tony Robbins on, who I love 100% my whole heart. If you've never listened to Tony Robbins, if you are interested in self-improvement, self-development, all that kind of stuff, you have to go listen to some stuff with Tony Robbins. He is wonderful. My husband and I saw him when he was in Calgary in 2019, I believe. Freaking amazing. Just like crazy energy. It was wild. So love him. So the podcast was really good. It was like 2 hours. Talked about a whole bunch of stuff. Took the dog for a nice long walk and listened to it. And then I came home and I cleaned out the closets while I finished listening to it. So very therapeutic. But what I wanted to talk about was this idea that's kind of going back to what we were on last week. That we are all basically, I think, desperate to find our identity. And it is essentially what either creates a fullness of life or an emptiness of life. When you are unsure of who you are, when you are constantly looking to other things to fulfill you and fill you and give you identity, it leaves a very wanting life. It leaves a very scarce life. Earlier last week, I put a post on our Instagram page about scarcity versus abundance. And this is something that I've really been thinking about as we think and talk about finances in our home and in the business. Are we living in an abundance mindset or are we living in a scarcity mindset? If you've never looked into the difference of the two, it's worth looking it up and doing some research on it. Typically, your mindset is formed from your childhood, and you live one of two ways based on kind of what you saw modeled in front of you. It's one of those things that's kind of stuck in your subconscious that you don't even know that's how you do things, but it is. So I had tended to be more on the scarcity mindset when it came to finances, of really this sense of holding on, of there would never be enough, or there would always just be barely enough, you know what I mean? But never this idea that there would be an abundance of it. Now, interestingly, when I started my business, I've always run my business with a very abundant mindset of knowing there will always be more clients, there will always be more girls to hire, there will always be more. Like, I'm never going to run out of the things that I need for that. So it's been interesting for me as I've been working through dealing with those two mindsets and why I think the way that I think. But I've also realized how much this transfers into our own lives. And we are either looking at our lives as scarce and that we are hanging on to things, and it creates almost, if you just envision like someone holding on really tight to something. And maybe like think of like a pack of Play-Doh. Like if they're holding onto a pile of Play-Doh, a person with a scarcity mindset is squeezing that Play-Doh. And then what happens? Well, that Play-Doh starts to squish out between their fingers and eventually will fall off. And then when they open their hand, they actually will have less Play-Doh. So in fact, they've made their fears a reality. By holding on so tightly and being so scared, they've created less. Versus an abundant mindset, if you think about that, when you hold your Play-Doh in your hand and you're not squeezing it, you're not going to lose any. If anything, maybe because your hand is open holding Play-Doh, someone might be like, hey, look at that weirdo holding Play-Doh in their hand, let's give them some more. And maybe you'll get some more in your hand, and then you end up having more. And this is this idea of scarcity versus abundance. And I think when it comes to our identity, if we are living in scarcity, we are unsure of who we are. But when we start to understand who we are, we live in an abundance because we know who we are and we can live in those things and in our strengths instead of playing into our weaknesses. And what Tony Robbins talked about today on that podcast was about knowing who you, so the tension in life happens, an unfulfilled life happens when who we think we are and who we want to be don't match up. So my challenge to everybody this week is to sit down with a pen and paper and write down who you want to be. And as you're creating that list, what you will find is if who you want to be, those things that you write out that just come naturally to you, this isn't overthinking it, just let it flow out. If who you want to be doesn't match up with who you are right now, it creates a tension and a lack of joy in life. And now opposite, if who you want to be, and then you look at your reality, if your reality is more than what you want to be, then there creates this pride and this like pleasure of your succeeding. Now, what often happens because of how humans are designed is then we will self-sabotage ourselves to then bring ourselves back down, which is a whole other conversation. But what we're looking for in a fulfilled life is knowing who you are and knowing what you want in life, and then your life that you live matching the same thing. So that's kind of where I'm at this week with stuff. I think it is super important to know who you want to be. And I'm going to share a little story here as we end on that note about my kiddo. You're hearing a lot about my son because he's given me a run for my money lately. But the other night, we had it out, and it's been a rough week with him, but we're working through it. And as we sat in his bed and talked about why he was making choices that he was making and how we could change those things, the topic came up where I asked him, well, who do you want to be? Like, when you think of yourself, how do you want to describe yourself? And he said, sorry, that's my dog. He said, I want to be, this is who he said he wanted to be. I want to be a hockey player who works out and who is a good kid. Okay, so he has 3 things that he wants to be, that he identifies of who he wants to be in life. So then I challenged him and I said, okay, so now when choices come into your life, you need to line those up with the person that you want to be. So if your friends are all going and doing something bad, and part of who you say you are is that you are a good kid, then do you participate in that? Does that make you be a good kid? Now, in that moment, of course, he knows the answer is no. No, it's not, Mom. Okay, great. So then again, I asked him the next day walking to school, who do you want to be, buddy? He said, who are you, buddy? I'm a hockey player, I work out, and I'm a good kid. Great. So then on Sunday morning, I got up and I was going to exercise. And I said to him, okay, get your stuff on. You're going to come work out with me. And naturally, grumble. And I said, but buddy, who are you? And he said, I'm a hockey player who works out and I'm a good kid. I said, okay, I'm going to ask you again. Do you want to come work out with me? Yep, let's do it. And we did it. And we had a great time. But it's this constant reminder, guys, that you need to know who you are. This doesn't need to be a list of 25,000 things. Make it simple. Make it 5 things. Who do you want to be? What do you value? Who do you want to be? And then look at your life. Is who you want to be and the life you're living matching? And if they're not, then my friend, you need to make some changes. And only you can do that. Only you can choose to match those 2 worlds together. And until you match those 2 together, you will live feeling unfulfilled. You will live in this scarcity mindset. And once you can start matching those 2 together, I promise you, you will begin to feel an abundance of life. So, make a list. Who do you want to be? And then next week, we're going to talk about keeping the promises that you make to yourself and what that does for you. So, love you all. Have a wonderful week. I hope you enjoy the sunshine. If you are near Alberta, where we are, get out, enjoy it, because it might be gone next week. Who knows? Okay, happy Monday.